Hey, Parse, you here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Chat, can you hear him? Can you hear Parse? Can you guys hear him?
Alaikum salam or vanakkam.
He's a Kannadiga. He's not a Tamil person. He says so to him. You would say namaskara.
Namaskar.
Namaskara. Yep. Little
Excellent.
low, but yes. Okay, so we'll talk. Let's talk about. Okay, so let's start with because I don't know if people are. Let's start. Well, let's just assume that people in this audience are not familiar with the original like instigation, like the original like situation of what happened to Massa Amini or Gina Amini. I we are going to use. I think the name we're going to use is Gina Amini, right?
Yeah, due to her Kurdish origins.
Gotcha. Okay, so we will talk about that a little bit. We will touch upon that a little bit. I want to because I am curious to see what the dynamic is with the central government of Iran and the Kurdistan provinces, or it's just one Kurdistan province, right?
No, there is Kermanshah, and then there's the Kurdistan province, and then there was also Ilam and Urumqi, which are heavily populated with Kurds.
Gotcha. Okay, so you have multiple Kurdish. So you have you have the proper Kurdistan province, and then you have multiple different
Mhm.
provinces in Iran that are that have a lot of Kurdish people in it. Okay, cool.
Correct.
So could you give us sort of the? Could you give us a sort of on a second? Could you give us a sort of understanding of what happened to Gina Amini?
So here's as far as I understand. So Gina and her family were visiting Tehran, and as most women do in Tehran and more urban areas, they loosely wear their hijab. And they can wear tight jeans, sometimes even high heels. But as long as they're wearing the headscarf, usually they don't get harassed in more urban settings, more liberal areas. This sometimes they do get harassed, mainly by just passerbys on the street. Sometimes by the morality police, which in Iran is Gesht Irshad. That's what they're called.
Got it. Could you repeat
And
that again?
the name,
Yeah, the name, yes.
yeah, Gesht Irshad.
Gash Ershad. Okay.
Yeah, that's basically the morality police that we're discussing.
Okay.
And so, as she was, visiting Tehran, doing what she was doing, she was loosely wearing her job, and the morality police caught on to her. And they asked her to basically, um, properly wear it. She declined and continued walking, as most women do, because they are just fed up with this type of policing on like issues that are insignificant in a lot of like secular Iranians' eyes. So they became more aggressive, and they took her to basically enlighten her. I put it in quotes. And she resisted, and as a
They took her
result,
where
they
now?
beat her.
Sorry, you're cutting out a little bit, so I just want to make sure we're clear about like what did you say?
So the basically the morality police took her to enlighten her. I put in quotes.
Like
If you cut that.
like the police station basically?
Kinda, but there's like an imam, or sorry, a mullah there, where they're gonna teach her the values of like properly dressing and why you
Okay.
shouldn't, be loosely, you shouldn't loosely wear the hijab, and the ramifications for
Oh,
that.
they took her to enlighten her. Okay, got you, got you.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. Okay.
So she didn't cooperate, and as a result, they were much more harsh and stricter, using physical violence, which I assume it was unintended for them, but they hit her very hard in the head, which put her in a coma, which led to her death a few days later.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and that's basically the situation with her more specifically.
Okay. Oh yeah. We might want to add a Twitter trigger warning for that as well. Okay, and Gina Amini is from the Kurdistan province of Iran, right? So
That is
she's
correct. I believe from the city of Saqqas.
okay, Saqqez, Iran. Okay, Saqqez, Iran. Okay, got it. So uh basically as we can probably tell, so as a result of the death of Gina Amini, right? Of Masa Amini, right?
Hmm.
Um you have enormous protests breaking out.
Her mother and her
You have
police,
massive
where she
protests.
was to determining the cause of.
Or where's the protest? You have you have massive amounts of protests breaking out all over Iran as a result of this, right? So,
Correct.
so you have massive amounts of protests. I mean, this is not in Iran in particular, but you have massive protests all around the world, and especially including in Iran, um, as a backlash to the death of Gina Amini, right? Um,
Mhm.
and my question is so so I have a couple of questions off the top of my head, but we'll get to that in a second. But the so just in a general scale, how like it's pretty obvious that it's across the entire country, right? But how big are we talking? Like how big of a backlash is this?
So this
Is
would
it like
be
in terms of what Iran has been through in relatively recent history, comparing it to, for example, say the 1979 revolution or other protest or like the Green Revolution of Iran, right? Uh,
mhm.
like, could you give me sort of a scale of, what has, what is really like how much of a backlash this is?
So if you want my opinion, this is bigger than all of them, maybe even comparable to the 1979 revolution in scale of the
Ooh,
anger that the people feel towards
ooh.
what happened.
So this is damn near revolution, basically.
It is comparable to that, yes.
Jesus Christ. Okay. So that and it's because if I'm not mistaken, women in Iran have been putting up with this for decades as a result of the morality, the police, the IRGC, uh,
Mhm.
and lots of other organizations in Iran that seek to enforce this sort of strict religious code in Iran, right?
Right,
So
decades, and
this is decades. So if I'm not mistaken, this is decades upon decades of anger, and
yes,
that is now like boiled into what is going on right now.
yeah, this and among other issues as well. Like
Right.
there,
And I'm sure
well,
that the sanctions that America has placed upon Iran has some sort of factor upon that as well. Uh
100%.
yeah, and obviously obviously if we want to go back to why this whole thing originally started in the first place, Mohammed Mossadegh was literally overthrown by the CIA and the MI6 back in the 50s. And the sort of backing of unscrupulous leaders in Iran by America and the UK are eventually what led to the 79 revolution, which led to this entire uh which led to this entire the enforcement of this religious code, right? We could go back to that. But I do want to ask so we understand that the scale of this is damn near the 1979.
It's massive.
It's
It's
massive.
huge.
It's
Yeah.
incredibly huge and it's global, right? So
Mhm.
I want to talk about what are some of the goals of the protests in result. What are some of the actionable items that the protests are looking to achieve?
Well, one of the things you have to understand is that these protests are not organized, so their
Right,
goals would vary depending on where they're protesting.
right,
So some of them could be war for workers' rights. Some places it could actually be the hijab issue and other like social issues. Other places could be like more cultural issues, like in, for example, minority areas, like the Kurds, for example. It will just depend where it's being protested.
So in places, so that gets kind of spills over into one of the questions I wanted to ask. What is the sort of relationship between so because Gina Amini was from Iranian Kurdistan, was from I think Sakaz, right?
Hmm.
What is the relationship between the central government of Iran, the overarching government of Iran, and some of the minority populations like the Kurds, the and in this case let's talk about the Kurds because the victim was of Kurdish origin.
Yeah, I could explain that. Kurds, roughly, as I understand them, make up 10% of the population. And if not a majority, at least a plurality of them are Shia, mainly in southern parts of the Kurdish regions in Iran.
Gotcha.
So think of cities like Kermanshah and Ilam. So these Kurds are more friendly towards the government. That doesn't mean they support it, they could have other issues with it. But when it comes to secession, these groups are less likely to basically partake in that.
And
Now, in,
so the ones in the Kurdistan province, right? So
mhm,
the one in the Kurdistan province, the majority of Kurds in the Kurdistan province, so these would count as the southern Kurds, is that right?
no, in the Kurdistan province, they would count as northern Kurds,
Okay, so
which
this
will be mostly Sunni.
okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, so the ones so Sakhez is part of northern the Kurdistan province is part of northern Kurdistan if you can northern Iranian Kurdistan, right? And so
Yeah,
if I'm understanding you correctly, northern Iranian Kurdistan has a more independent spirit, if you will. They have a more separatist spirit, if I'm correct, right?
they do. Due to a lot of the abuse that they've taken both under the Shah and under obviously the Islamic Republic.
So does that so I'm guessing the protests that are happening in that particular region are obviously factoring in Kurdish independence into all this, right?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. So basically so I guess that circles back to my question. So because the protests are incredibly disorganized, right? Is I'm assuming that there is there like one combining is there sort of one combining goal that you can say unites all of the protests that can be like one sort of actionable item, right?
If
I'm
there is
assuming that
one,
would be the hijab, the loosening of the hijab laws or the complete jettisoning of it, right?
well, that would be among more younger and more urban people. But in general, if I had to say overall, it's their shared hatred of Khamenei, or the super leader more specifically.
And is there any one particular reason for that, or is it just because everyone has their own particular beef with him?
Everyone has their particular beef with them. It's just every ill that they could possibly conceive, be it imagined or real. And in a lot of cases, it is real. It's blamed on him because he's the leader.
Got it. Okay, so basically, well, what is it? So, how are the sanctions that America puts on Iran perceived? Is it like do they blame America particularly for that, or do they like also blame the Khamenei for that?
Well, it depended on when you asked. Like, if it was during like 2015 or prior to that, it was blamed largely on the government. Post deal, and especially when Trump left the deal just unilaterally, it became the population in large garnered a more negative view of the West and of America more specifically.
Okay, so that makes more sense. Because Trump like basically like openly said fuck you, and he basically said we're backing out of this agreement that we made earlier, and that presented a more easy sort of effigy to sort of target. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Okay,
So
so that makes
if
sense.
yeah, so even if there are young Iranians that are progressive and hate the Islamic Republic, they still have a negative view of the West as a result of that action.
and that is a very understandable perspective, right? I don't blame them for that perspective at all in the slightest, right? Uh so uh so I'm gonna play some stuff in the background while this is happening. I'm gonna lower the volume while we can continue having this conversation. But basically, so one of the questions that I am, so I guess, and I want to shoot one of these. So I talked about this with you earlier, and I
Mhm.
saw this, and I just want to make sure that this is perfectly clear. This is not a sort of what is happening in Iran is not any sort of color revolution or anything like that, is it? It's not
Mhm.
any sort of like so despite the fact that the US has absolutely intervened in Iran's affairs negative and produced negative results in Iran's governance and has effectively screwed Iran over for decades because of the monopoly on oil that they wanted, right? But these sorts of protests are like absolutely organic. Is that fair to say? Like this has nothing to like it's not like any sort of plot or anything like that.
That is correct. These are organic and that they have been building up for a long time underground.
Right. So this is something that is like the Iranian people are legitimately angry towards Iran, like the Ayatollah, the mullahs and the overall what was the current president's name right now of Iran?
Uh, his name is Ibrahim Raisi.
Raisi, yes. Cuz earlier it was Rouhani, wasn't it?
Yeah, Hassan Rouhani.
Hassan Rouhani. Okay. Um so uh so so I remember Rouhani was more of a in comparison to like Ahmadinejad, right?
Hmm.
In comparison to Ahmadinejad, which was the Bush era president of Iran, right? Uh,
Right.
Hassan Rouhani, right? He was significantly more moderate in
He,
Iran, right?
he was part of the reformist faction.
So he was part of the reform. Could you tell me a little bit about like just in general how like so the reformist faction is generally you can kind of say the more progressive angle, or sort of the more progressive faction, relatively speaking, in Iran, right?
They are. They're the pro-peace with the West side of the wing. Even though on foreign policy they do support these militia groups, throughout Iraq and Lebanon and Syria. They are more progressive socially. Obviously not by Western standards, but by Iranian standards, they're definitely leaning in that direction. And there was a brief time where they did remove the death penalty for LGBT people.
Interesting, interesting. And then so in comparison to Rouhani, Raisi is on the opposite end, basically, right? He's not in the reformist faction at all, is he?
He's a hardliner.
He's a hardliner. Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's okay. So that's an important tell because I believe that. Do you think so? My question is, do you think Rouhani would have been more? First of all, I'm assuming the sanctions and the fact that Trump walked out of the agreement basically hurt Rouhani's poll numbers. Is that correct?
Not just because you have to understand, poll numbers don't actually mean that much. It's just that when it comes to the internal politics, I think he looked like a clown because they say, oh, you're a fool, you trusted them, and they stabbed us in the back. He put us in a vulnerable position.
Interesting. Okay, that's yeah, right. Okay, that's exactly what I was trying to articulate, but I didn't know what was the right way of articulating that. But yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
Rouhani basically was made to look like a fool for trusting the West, right? And
exactly.
and basically Iran was put into this very precarious position uh, as a result of trusting Obama and then Trump basically going back on that agreement, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so but do you think so what do you think Rouhani's response to this would have been? Because if I'm not mistaken, Raisi is not like he is not willing to budge at all on this. That's the sense that I'm getting off of this, right?
Yeah, Renzi is again a hardliner, and in the face of it, like on cameras, he will say he will not budge to any demand.
So he
Well,
said he said directly he will not budge.
yeah, he says directly that he will not budge. Now, the truth of the matter could be a little bit different, but on camera, he'll have a more harder stance.
Oh, so that's interesting. So this does present an opportunity. Um so do you think that so my sort of question is, do you think in that case there'll be backroom door or backdoor deals, backroom deals made with the the sort of uh the clergy of Iran? Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think that or with like Raisi's faction, do you think there will be um concessions made in favor of the protest? Do you think that is a
Uh,
possibility, or do you think in this case, like, does he have a history of ever, or does his faction have a history of ever conceding while having that sort of like hardline face?
they do actually, and this was a prominent a few months ago where they allowed women or became, laxed the laws of like stadium laws, where women can join along with the men to watch games.
Got you. Gotcha, that makes sense. So what it seems like to me, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the situation in Iran is to present a sort of strong face in the face of all of the backlash as a result of Gina Amini, right?
Mhm.
As a result of Gina Amini's murder, right? Um,
Yeah.
there is a decent possibility that Raisi, the hardliner, may end up having to concede, right? Is so I think that's a very interesting thing, because, and especially considering the scale of the protests, uh as you're saying, this is nearly unprecedented, right?
Yeah.
The only thing that comes, I mean, the only thing that is you could probably compare this to is the 79 revolutions, right? uh
Yeah, on this scale, with like people attacking police officers, like even killing them, yeah, at times, people taking over government buildings. Yeah, this is unprecedented.
that's interesting. So now I want to be perfectly clear with the audience right quick. I don't think for a second that this is going to cause like massive regime change. I don't think we're going to have another 79 revolution. I just want to be clear about that. Like, but I think and feel free to like, I don't know if you have a different perspective on that. I don't know if like that's going to happen. I think there's some Western outlets, especially like NPR, that are saying like, what is it? The protests won't lead to regime change, Iran's foreign minister tells NPR, which I think is sort of an asinine thing to say if you're NPR. Like, fuck you, right? But I do think what is going to happen is there will be concessions made. I don't think the current hardline governor, or the current hardline president of Iran, based on what you've told me thus far, will be able to basically hold strong. Like, the protests will be effective in some capacity. Am I getting a good reading on that?
You are, yeah. So here's what could happen.
Right.
So he will have to have the strong persona. The protests will die down eventually due to the harsh amount of force that the government is using. What they will do to ensure this doesn't happen again is lax the role of the morality police and reform a little bit on the hijab law. So it's not as intrusive on women, especially in more liberal areas. But what they could do in return is encourage culturally families to enforce the hijab on their, female relatives.
Hmm. So how does that dynamic work though? So like, so what if the because I think so the that's an interesting thing that you said because I want to know like how they would even enforce that, right? Because now they're gonna rely on the families to enforce that,
Right.
right? So what is going to happen? Say if you're an Iranian woman that says, no, I don't want to wear the hijab in the way that you want me to wear the hijab, and I'm gonna wear it this way. The government, if according to the lax laws, like they would have just laxed, right? If all of this
Yeah.
happens, right,
Right.
that can't be enforced on them. So
Yeah.
so is it so would this still be like a I mean would this basically just be like the concession that people are looking for, like at least a small bit of the concession that they're looking for, right? Because now the government isn't enforcing it. Now the government is not like cracking down on them, and it's much easier to basically tell your family to get bent and leave.
Right. So what you will see, if this comes to fruition, what you will see is that in liberal areas, i.e., the urban settings, most of them, women would just stop giving a shit about this dress code.
Mm-hmm.
You will most likely see that. Now, where the mullahs do have a lot of influence is mainly in the rural areas and towns, which they have appointed figure known as Imam Jomeh, which lead the Friday prayers, and they have a lot of influence over the constituencies in those areas, so they could culturally push that through the people there in those areas.
So kind of the angle that you're aiming for is instead of so what the kind of angle that you're talking about is rather than force it at the barrel of a gun, they're gonna try and more go through the indoctrination route. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Uh, so by the way, like I know that. Do you mind if I bring up this your family and whatnot? Is that cool or?
Yeah, I don't mind it.
So, first of all, I just want to ask, like, is your mom or your family okay back in Iran, right? Because I know you haven't had uh contact with them in a while.
Yeah, 10 or 11 days, pretty
Yeah,
much
you
since it's
told me this
been going
earlier,
on.
right? How's that like I'm sorry if I'm bringing up any wounds at the moment, but I just want to make sure like it like because I want to like I'd like to ask you how this has affected you directly, right?
Well, as you may know, I'm also like in school right now or in college and studying, and it certainly hasn't helped because it's always in the back of your mind as you're studying.
Right.
So it has been. It's like a little slight sense of dread because I know they're not going outside. They're most likely just staying inside, but they don't have internet access to really talk with me.
Mm-hmm.
But when you don't have contact for so long, it just makes you wonder.
Right. Jesus Christ. And and I'm guessing your family is generally in the Tehran area, right?
That is correct. They're either in the nearby city of Karaj or Tehran.
Gotcha. Okay. And I'm guessing obviously in Tehran there's massive protests as well. It's all across the country.
All across the country,
All
with the
across.
exception of maybe Balochistan. But
Yeah, Balochistan is probably the one place where uh it might not be as because if I'm not mistaken, in Balochistan there's already like a sort of at least in Pakistan there's a separatist movement in Balochistan as well. I don't know how it is in Iran, uh but yeah, so where so my uh so my question is where exactly does Iran go from here? So we talked about like this is going to happen, right? But where like how do you think that the US is going to weaponize this even further to put pressure on Iran?
Of course.
Okay. And
Any
in what way
we're
do
not.
you think that's going to happen?
So they'll most likely just play the women's rights angle, and
As they are
give
doing right now, yes.
as they're doing right now, and give some platitude support. Maybe even talk about giving internet, which they don't have the infrastructure or capability to do anything like that. Um, and they will host activists, diaspora activists, to basically get their voices heard on this foreign soil as well. But beyond that, I don't think they'll really be able to do much else.
So they won't be able to do anything in terms of like sanctions, or they won't be able to put on like more sanctions or anything like that, or they won't be able to weaponize sort of things in like they won't be able to will they be able to weaponize the protests that are happening in Iran at the moment, or no?
They won't be able to sanction anything that hasn't been sanctioned before, really.
Right.
So
So
Iran,
basically the what the US is likely going to offer in this case is just like platitudes and saying, "Hey, we need to respect all women, and we need to make sure that like feminist talking points, and we're going to argue it from a feminist perspective, and we're going to offer basic platitudes to all this, but other than that, and we're going to platform like Iranian diaspora activists, but other than that, not much else is going to happen." Is that the general takeaway?
that's the general takeaway because there's really, realistically, nothing much that they can do.
Yeah, so there's nothing that the US government can do in Iran at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh I'm assuming that Iran's allies are not happy with this either. They're not happy with the sort of goings on inside Iran because it produces instability in Iran that may not be conducive for relations with like Iran's allies.
Yeah.
They're
So
absolutely not happy with this, I'm assuming.
that is correct. So China has invested a lot in Iran. They've had that 25-year agreement
Right.
with China. So, and as a result, we lease them our ports, as you know, most other countries in South Asia do as well. Russia, right now, we supply them with weapons,
Mm-hmm.
and they would prefer to keep it that way. We supply them with drones, and they would rather not lose us in that since we're both sanctioned countries. And we basically just get closer with each other economically.
Capitalism, baby. But
Yeah.
so I think that makes okay, so that makes a lot of sense to me, right? Um I think that makes sense. But so I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't know what I know in India a lot of people have seen the talking points already, and I'm just coming at it from an Indian perspective, right? So in India, a lot of the Islamophobes, the BJP government, have basically used, and it's not just now, but they've been using Iran as an example of, hijab is not necessary. Hijab, you don't need to wear the hijab. We should be able to ban it in terms of school uniforms, right? But I think I actually do have one other question. So this is a question I've been meaning to ask an actual Iranian. What so this is so what do the Iranian women actually like? How do the Iranian protesters want us to provide solidarity? Or do they even want us to provide solidarity at all? Like what is
Oh, of course, simply just spread the word as much as you can. That's what the diaspora have been doing, have been talking about their experiences, more particularly about women's experiences. Obviously, I can give you all my perspectives, but I never lived that experience because I'll be like a part of a privileged group.
right? I'm assuming you know plenty of Iranian women that could provide their perspective on this.
Of course. One of the stories I could tell you is my cousin.
Okay, go ahead.
So, and this wasn't by police, but this was just a regular old ass man. She was traveling, I believe, to Turkey at the time, and she took a snap. A snap is basically our version of Uber. So she packed her luggage, got everything, put it in the car, and midway through, she just briefly took off for her job, which the driver insisted that she should wear it. And she responded by saying, "You should mind your own fucking business." So what the guy did is she just left her on the highway with her luggage and just didn't take her to the destination that she wanted, which was the airport.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
it would be to that degree.
Now this is just like your version of Uber, or like this is Snap, right? Snap is the name of this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's now.
Yeah. So uh if Iran's version of Uber is doing this, then imagine what the Iranian, I mean, we already know what the Iranian government has been doing, right?
Yeah.
And it's absolutely fucking atrocious.
Yeah.
It's absolutely gross. Um so yeah, it's like, so what are the latest developments of what are the current latest developments? And I think the death toll is rising rapidly in the Iranian protests.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like 40, I think it's risen to like 70 people died, uh, killed by police, by the way. So I believe I also heard somewhere that a female police squadron was deployed to quell the protest.
Yeah, they have their female squadron as well, mainly for issues like this and pertaining to just why the warrants against women mainly.
Gotcha. So it's basically like, so it's literally just to be like, hey, these women are telling you to shut the fuck up. So you know, you
Yeah,
better okay.
and there have been counter protests as well.
Popular slogans will be okay. So other popular slogans include, the year of the blood, Sayyid Ali, that is Ali Khamenei, the current the current Ayatollah.
Yep.
What is the Zahak? Zahak?
So it's a Persian myth. This Zahak was a king that made a deal with the devil, where he could live a long life, but he has two snakes coming out of his shoulders, which he must feed regularly. So he will feed his snakes, feed his subjects to his slaves. No, sorry, snakes.
That is a very accurate description of what's going on in modern day Iran. Holy shit. That's a
Yeah.
very accurate government against women. We don't want it. We don't want it. Iranians, shout out your rights. This is the last message. From Kurdistan to Tehran, violence against women. I think that was lost in translation. Khamenei is a murderer. His vilayet, his province is invalid. I think his vilayet is, at least the way I understand the word vilayet in like Urdu, it means province, right?
Well, in this case, it's government.
Government. Got it. Sweat to the blood of Massa. Iran will be free. So who's Mojtaba?
That's Khamenei's son. And
Oh,
speculated to be his successor.
got it. Okay, that makes sense. And then Basiji.
Yeah, that would be the Revolutionary Guard.
Oh, so that's the IRGC. Got it. Okay, got it. Okay. And then you have one person in her hometown of Sakhez that died, and a lot of this is, wait, Amol is where Mazandaran.
Almost should be in the north, yeah.
Yeah,
Something.
Mazandaran. Okay, yeah, so it's in the north. Amol, Babel, Divandare, you know, it's fucking heartbreaking what's going on here. But hopefully some uh hopefully some good developments will come out of Iran. And I hope that even though that the hardline government is trying its best to put like a hard face on all of this, right?
Yeah.
Um they'll be I'm hoping that they concede. And and based on precedent, it likely it may very well concede to the protests. And like you said, what they might do is what they might do is they'll likely reduce the protest through force, right?
Yeah.
Uh and then what they'll do to make sure that this doesn't happen is they'll lax the laws just enough so that there's less of an incentive to talk about, or there's less of an incentive to protest. Is that it?
Yeah, basically just on this particular issue, they want the temperature to die down a bit, and they are willing to make that concession to ensure that happens.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. Okay.
Yeah.
Um
Any other particular questions you might have had about Iran? Since I'm here, I could probably answer a lot of them.
yeah, I mean I have general questions about Iran, but like we could do like in Iran, we could kind of pivot away from what is happening in the wake of Masa Amini or Gina Amini. And like we could sort of because I think this is still an ongoing development at the moment.
It is.
It is like things are coming out every day, and I actually uh, I might talk about this even like tomorrow after you leave, right? I might talk about it. I will very likely at least touch upon Iran right after tomorrow, just to basically keep up with what's going on. But as far as as far as Iran is concerned, right? Uh, could you give me like just a general? I think this is a good idea. Could you just give me a general understanding of Iranian civics? Like, how does the like condense like Iranian AP government into like 5 minutes if you could do that? Like, what is the way? Like, how like? Because I think what is interesting about the way Iran works is the Ayatollah has like the supreme leader has a say in who the president is. Like ultimately it is, and I
Yeah.
want and the way the Ayatollah is selected is through a different process than the way the president is selected, right? So could
Right.
you give us an idea of how like Iranian elections work, how sort of the sort of way the leaders are elected in Iran, or how the leaders are selected in Iran, if you will?
So there's a council uh, of, basically kind of like an oligarchic system of mullahs, which they amongst themselves will elect who would be the next supreme leader. And the supreme leader does have a lot of authority on both the day-to-day and foreign policy in every matter, really. They can supersede the president. And they have direct and like their own private army, which is the IRGC or the SE. They have their own media network. So they functionally run the country. They have a facade of a democratic system, and that's where the president comes in. And this is nothing new. The Shah used this as well, where they have elections, which whoever the supreme leader picks, be it a reformist, be it a hardliner, be it a conservative, they'll have the final say on who will be in charge. There is a parliament. However, a lot of the people there are appointed, the mayoral system, everyone's appointed. The only exception to that would be certain minorities, mainly religious ones, be it mostly from the Jewish, Armenian, or the Mandaean, or Syrian as well, I believe.
So the
They have
the
representatives.
appointed seats, if I'm getting you right, are from ethnic minorities, or they're from religious minorities, right?
Religious minorities, be it like Zoroastrians, for example, Armenians, being like Christians, Jews, they have a guaranteed seat on the parliament where they can basically air whatever, or represent their constituency.
Right. Right. That makes a lot of sense. And then the principalists are basically you can kind of, they're the hardliner, basically. They're the hard. I have the Iran Islamic Consultative Assembly pulled up at the moment.
Mhm.
So the principalists are the hardliners that you're talking about, right?
Yeah. So you have to understand, everyone here is pro-Islamic Republic, every single one of them, including the minorities. Um, it's just that they just belong to either the reformist faction, to put it simply, hardliner and conservative.
Well, I mean, of
And
course, they're going to be pro-Islamic government, Islamic Republic of Iran. The sort
yeah,
of so what I'm asking is like principalists are the more conservative, like they're the more conservative of the people elected to parliament, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
whereas the reformists are they would be more or less like a more you could arguably say a more relatively progressive uh faction in
mhm,
Iran.
they are. Yeah, and some of our best presidents, which came from the reformist faction. One of them was Khatami, which was the best one out of all of them in
Okay.
recent memory.
What was Rafsanjani?
Rafsanjani was before my time, but he was the one that propped up Khamenei to become supreme leader. He was, as I understand it, under the impression that Khamenei could be controlled, and he miscalculated severely.
Interesting.
But he
So what
was
is so I for the audience that might not know, what are the so what is the difference between because by the way, a lot of Westerners fuck this up.
mm,
People mess up Khamenei's name with the previous Ayatollah Khomeini,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So what is the difference between so Khomeini is actually the one that is the so for the audience that might not know, Khamenei is the current Ayatollah of Iran. His predecessor was a guy called Ruhollah Khomeini, right? So this guy, right? Um, so Ruhollah Khomeini was basically the guy you can kind of say he's the figurehead of the 1979 revolution, right? So my my question is what is the substantive is there what are the substantive differences between Khomeini and Khamenei and because the reason I want to touch upon that a little bit is because you mentioned that when I asked about Rafsanjani, right,
mhm,
who was a former president of Iran, right,
yeah,
you said he was the one that propped up Khamenei into power because he thought Khamenei uh could be controlled and he severely
yeah,
miscalculated, right? So
yeah.
my sort of question going from here is what are the differences between Khomeini and Khamenei in this case? And why specifically did you say like why did you particularly include that? Like what was the thing that Rafsanjani was trying to control here?
So I'll just say the difference. Khamenei will be whatever. So initially he started off as simply a conservative. He is leaning more in the hardline nowadays. Uh, Khomeini has always been hardline. He was always fanatical, radical in his beliefs, and he demonstrated as much with the harsh laws that he has implemented that has been laxed by Khamenei and even Rafsanjani over the years.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so basically overall coming to power and Rafsanjani coming to power was generally a good thing.
It was definitely an upgrade.
It was definitely what?
It was definitely an upgrade compared to Khomeini.
It was
Yeah.
definitely an upgrade. Yes. So Khomeini has always been like the Khomeini has always been like the hard line, right? He's always been super conservative from day one, and it was basically he was the figurehead of the Islamic Revolution of 1979, right?
Yeah.
And he was the first leader of Iran. So basically, he actually only held office for 10 years, it seems like, right? And then
He
Khamenei has
was.
been leading the country since then, right?
Yeah, he no. I will preface this. It does. His Khomeini's death is suspicious under suspicious circumstances.
Oh, interesting. So what is the suspicion here?
Uh, I suspect, just based on what I've read, is that he might have been poisoned during his last days.
Interesting. By who?
Just people within the government. So this would include people like Rafsanjani potentially, and other conservatives, and people in his line, mainly due to the embarrassment of the decisions he made during the Iran and Iraq war.
Got you. No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so he was born in Sublime State of Persia. That was basically the. Oh, so that was Qajar, Iran. Okay, got you.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, so basically, Khamenei is an upgrade from Khomeini, and essentially, so what you could arguably say that is Iran's form of governance is sort of a more, and again, feel free to disagree on this, but like similar to how America, we have an oligopolistic system where you have a semblance of a democracy here, but in reality, like the biggest players in the electoral game are large companies over here. In Iran, instead of these large multinational corporations, you have basically mullahs, you have the clergy. Is that right?
That would be a correct assessment, although post sanctions, more so now in the military as well.
Oh, so the military. So what is the role of the revolutionary? So is the IRGC is the military, right? Or is that a different thing?
No, it is part of it. Like, there are other branches of it that are more, more civil on the civilian side. There is the IRGC, and then there's I think three
Okay, let me double.
divisions of it.
Gotcha. Oh, and then you said the IRGC is basically the. They're basically the. Did you say that these guys were the primary? Oh no, so the Basij is the service branch of. Oh, it's a branch
Yeah,
of the Iranian armed forces. Okay, got it.
yeah,
And then, uh, and then the Basij is one of the five forces of the IRGC. Got it.
yeah. And then there are other sides of it
Like the
that
Quds
aren't really
force. Yeah.
directly. Yeah, they're not directly linked with that. Although sometimes they're even like more civilian oriented with just general Iranian public.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. Got it. Um.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then if we go to the armed forces of Iran in general, right? The hold on a second. Uh, where is it? Iranian armed forces. Okay, so you have what are the oh so you have the army, you have the Revolutionary Guards, and then you have the cops. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then all right, that makes sense. So this is so what exactly is the um I had a question, I totally forgot it. Um it had to do with the IRGC. What train were we on earlier? Sorry.
So we were just looking at the divisions, the army divisions, or the armed forces mainly in Iran,
Oh,
and one of them
so
being the
I had a
army.
slightly tangential question. So,
Hmm.
uh, Qasem Soleimani, right? So
Right.
he was a commander of the IRGC, right?
I believe in the Quds forces.
Or it might have been the
within,
Quds forces, yeah. So
yeah.
okay, yeah, I got it. And then where is it? Yeah, it was probably Email Khani. Uh, it might have been the Quds Force. You're right. But so basically, what was I trying to say? Damn it, I forgot that question. If I figure out what that question is, I'll run back to it.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
but overall, I think um I think that's basically like a good understanding for the audience. Like, I think that's I think we went through. If there's anything else that you have or you want to like do like a cultural exchange on, like sort of
Mm,
what are we talked about the Kurdish sort of separatism that's happening in Iran. We touched upon that a little bit.
mm.
What so I actually do have one sort of tangential question that's related that is Iran and that is related to Iran. So
Mhm.
I my gut based on my understanding of like Iran, right? Or just my understanding of countries in general, right?
Mhm.
Is that when you have a sort of majority minority dynamic, right?
Yeah.
The minority is going to have to deal with hurdles that the majority does not have to deal with, right? So in the case of Iran, my gut instinct, just just by principle, right, is that the Azeris, the Azerbaijanis, the Kurds, the Balochis, the Turkmens in the northeastern part of the country, um, they're going to have a particular kind of relationship with the central government of Iran, with the main government of Iran. And I want to know like what like so the what is this sort of dynamic between uh like just a general idea, like it sounds like a silly question, but to what extent is there like an oppression of ethnic minorities in Iran? Because this is a question that's really been on the back of my mind here, and it's tangentially related to all this because Gina Amini was part of, again, she was Kurdish in this case, right? And I
Yeah.
believe like she comes from because was it Kadet? What was the name of the city?
Saqqas.
Sakhez, yes. So she comes from Sakhez, right? So and that is in the northern regions of Kurdistan. So I want to know like what extent do the various ethnic minorities have to deal with sort of the central government of Iran oppressing them in that sense? It's kind of a weird question to ask in that sense, but
Yeah, I can give you some insight. When it comes to its various ethnic groups, obviously some get preferential treatment over the others, and I'm not. And obviously we know Persian would be the dominant one, but I'm talking there is also preferences among the ethnic groups. So Azeris, being the biggest minority, somewhere around 16 to 20% of Iran's population, they also have a lot of institutional power. Um, they are probably the most well integrated ethnic group, despite receiving harassments and mistreatment.
so and to underscore that, the current Ayatollah is of Azeri origin, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
Khamenei is of Azeri origin, is he not?
Yes.
Got it.
So, amongst the Azeris, you'll find a lot more. And Iranian Azeris consider themselves more unique than the Azeris in the country of Azerbaijan. Um, so they do view themselves as Iranian, but you'll find a lot of variety due to their sheer size. You'll find a lot of variety in their ideology as well. There'll be
So,
secularists, religious people, nationalists of the Iranian kind, nationalists of the Turkish nationalist kind, where they do want to see secession. But in general, they're the most well integrated, and there's a lot of intermarriage between Persians and Azeris. I
Got it.
myself am half Azeri.
That's something I've noticed. Like one of the comedians here, Maximini. I don't know. I'm sure you've probably heard of him.
I know him.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, his mother is half Azeri, and they were, and you refer to Azeris in Iran as Turks, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, they are Turks, but
They're
their
not the Turks
identity
of
is
Turkey.
close to.
They're not the Turks of Turkey, but they're called the Azeris in Iran are called Turks,
Yeah.
right? Um, what about so Azeris are the most well integrated. What about the Kurds?
Now the Kurds, again, there's the Shia-Sunni dynamic. The Shia areas are more intermixed with Persians, so there's a significant chunk of Persians that live in that areas, and there's a lot of intermarriage there. Among the Sunnis, realistically, the only thing that's stopping it from being something like Iraq or Turkey is the shared cultural history between Persians and Kurds, regardless of their religion.
Yeah,
There
because
is,
the languages are similar, are they not?
yeah, they're in the same family. We have a lot of the similar ceremonies and holidays, like Nowruz, for example, and
Right.
Yalda night.
Right.
So,
So basically,
yeah,
the only thing that's keeping like Kurdistan, like Iranian Kurdistan, as part of Iran is that like Iran and Kurds have like Persians and Kurds in particular have shared history and they have shared
yeah,
culture basically.
exactly. They have a lot of shared, basically belonging to the same cultural family group does help in that regard.
Right. And then so I guess the other thing that I wanted to ask in terms of this sort of question was um uh the Balochi the Balochi regions of Iran, because in Pakistan there's an insurgency in the Balochistan province of Pakistan that is more or less, you can kind of say, pro independent Balochistan, right?
Right.
What is the relationship between between the Balochis of Iran and the Iranian government?
I would say it's really bad. In fact, should Iran just collapse as a state, um, and let's say hypothetically everything I said about the Kurds is true, the Kurds will be less likely to secede than the Baluchis. The Baluchis will be out in an instant, and rightfully so, because we mistreat the fuck out of them.
Got it. So
Yeah,
Balochis are probably the one ethnicity in Iran, or like they're the one region of Iran that have like they have the biggest independent streak, basically.
they do. Yeah, and they're the most just called the Baluchis culturally are very hyper conservative. Just at a cultural level in Iran, I don't know how it is in Pakistan. Maybe it's a little bit different there. But here they're pretty conservative and they're pretty, I would say, like xenophobic. They're kind of like an isolationist type of group of people where they just keep to themselves mostly.
Right. Okay, no, that makes sense. And also I know there's a lot of like immigrants from Afghanistan and in particularly the Hazara ethnicity from Afghanistan that
Mhm.
enters Iran. What is their sort of experience? I mean, and again, I'm asking someone that is not Hazara, someone that is not Balochi, but just someone that is from Iran about like generally how like the dynamics of Iran work in general. But like how are like I'm guessing the largest amount of immigrant workers in Iran are from Afghanistan, right?
Yeah, and they're treated about basically how you would expect like a refugee population to be treated, basically like cheap labor.
Right. Okay. So it's basically similar to the way we were treating Haitians, we were treating, name whatever, like Americans were treating, or the way that Indians were treating the Rohingya population, and to a lesser extent, you can kind of say the Sri Lankan Tamil population in the South, right? Um, okay, so it's basically like yes, okay,
Yeah,
and I'm
like
guessing the vast majority of, so is it like the vast majority of Afghans that come to Iran are Tajiks and Hazaras? Is that it?
That is true with a smaller group of Pashtuns, because Pashtuns usually just go to Pakistan.
Yeah, no, I figured as much. Yeah, the Pashtuns will go to Pakistan, and then the other ethnic groups of Afghanistan will go to their respective. Like the Uzbeks would probably go to Uzbekistan if they could, so on and so forth. But the Hazaras and Tajiks end up going to Iran.
Yeah, and the worst part is like they do receive from people mostly platitudes of brotherhood and shared culture, but in truth they just use this cheap labor.
Yeah, and then they're not treated terribly well. They're not treated well at all.
Yeah, exactly. So much so that they're only through like generous donations, people have started building private schools because publicly non-citizens can't go to school in Iran. So people started building private schools, and teachers have been privately teaching Afghan children more specifically,
Interesting.
so they can have an education. But one group that we did gloss over that is both treated terribly by government and people are the Arabs in the southwest.
Ah, wait, yes, that's also true. We did forget about that. Yes. We did gloss over the Arabs. So how are the Arabs treated in Iran?
I would say they are the most likely, aside from the Baluchis, they're the most likely to have lethal encounters with cops.
Could you repeat that
Or
again? You kind of
yeah, so Arabs are just after the Baluchis, they're the most likely to have a lethal encounter with cops over like the most mundane issues.
got it.
Yeah, and the people do have a negative view of them, and it's the similar view that the Turks have, where Arabs are just viewed as backwards barbarians.
Got it. No, that makes okay. So then, like, so is it that the Arabs also like the Arabs of Iran also have like a massive independence streak as well?
They do, but there's one. The one problem is that there's only 1 million of them, and the area where they're localized is heavily mixed with two other ethnic groups, being Lors and Persians. So Arabs, where they're localized, is in the Khuzestan province, in the city of Ahvaz more particularly, and they're only like around throughout the whole province. They're around 33% of the population. The rest would be a mix of Lors and Persians.
So are lures? So I was wondering if so are lures Persian or are they different from Persian?
They are Lors. That's honestly the best way I could put it.
So they're a different ethnic group entirely.
Yeah, part of the same group, but they yeah, they just have their own little region.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. I keep saying that makes sense, but it is like as I talk to you, sort of, I'm getting a better understanding of like the dynamics of Iran and how Iran works in general. Again, like I'm not gonna claim to understand how Iran works at the end of this, but I
Yeah,
am beginning to like, and it's not just like, by the way, it's not like this is not the only time we've like showcased Iran on this channel before. We've like
yeah,
we've seen Drew Binsky videos. You've showed me several videos on Iran. I've reacted to several videos on Iran as well, right?
yeah,
And so this is not like this. By no means is this the Utter None Knows broadcast, Utter None Know broadcast first foray into, I guess you could say cultural cousins, in a sense,
yeah.
because
Yeah,
India is
you're,
also because India has a lot of cultural influence from sort of the Persian speaking regions, right? because
mhm.
and just to give you sort of the connection between India and Iran, Hindi slash Urdu, which is one of the two national languages of India, uh, like it was Urdu slash Hindi was born out of a Persianized dialect of the Delhi region. So if you speak Hindi, you're going to be using a lot of Persian words, right? Like the word, for example, Hazar. Hazar means 1,000 in Hindi.
Thousand. Yeah,
It means 1,000 in Hindi, right? Or like
yeah,
it's more prominent in Urdu because it was like Urdu's obviously more Urdu is obviously like more Persianized and Arabized, right, than Hindi is. But even in Hindi, you have like parishan, right, which means scared or fear, if I'm not mistaken, right? Uh,
That's a pretty old word too. I don't think we use it in modern version, but the Tajiks and Dari might use it.
right. I think Hindi was like influenced by the Dari dialects of Persian, if I'm not mistaken.
That makes sense. Most of the dynasties that ruled in India were in the
Right.
Persians of Central Asia.
Right. But like Hamesha, like that's another word, right?
Mhm.
Like we have a lot of like Persian influence in India as well. Like India's base at this point, like one of the most popular like most. If you've had Indian food in America and you've had like butter chicken, like tandoori, the word tandoori is Persian in origin, right? Like a lot of stuff that India has, samosa is Persian in origin. Uh, Biryani is Persian in origin, right? It like a lot of the stuff that we've come to love in India actually comes from Iran, or it comes from maybe not Iran so much, but like the Persian speaking regions, right? So that includes Iran, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Central Asia in general, right?
Yeah.
So there is I guess that if you want to tie this back to India in some way, Iran, you can say, has had a massive cultural influence, or like the Persian, like, yeah, Iran has had a massive cultural influence over India, right? Now, the BJP is in India trying to get rid of that cultural influence, right? Because they're psycho Hindu nationalists and they want nothing to do with Persian or Iran or anything like that, or, God forbid, Arabic words exist in Hindi. I know, woo, right? Um, but that's the sort of connection that India and Iran have. And I think India, and in terms of foreign policy, right? In terms of diplomatic relations, Iran and India are on good terms. Am I not mistaken?
Yeah, you're correct. Not only that, but India, to counter China, is also investing in Iran. Mainly in the Balochistan region, there's the Charbahar port, which they want to get leased to themselves so they can build like a gateway to Europe through Azerbaijan and Russia.
Interesting. So basically, what's happening in Iran is basically like an arms race between India and China to gain influence in Iran.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and the reason is, okay, I see the map right here. So you have Mumbai to Chabahar, right? And then you have Chabahar, and then I guess this goes into Afghanistan, I suppose.
No, yeah, this was the previous one where India at the time wanted to just completely surpass Pakistan and help the, at the time, Afghan government. Although this has been disbanded due to the Taliban takeover.
Right.
Yeah, but the other one that they want to do is still use Chabahar, but go through Iran and then to Azerbaijan and then into Russia.
Right. And I'm guessing Jandala is the Jandala is basically the Baloch. It is sort of a militant group fighting on behalf of the Balochis in Iran.
That's one of the groups.
That's
yeah.
one of the. So that's one of them. But I'm assuming that's the more like extreme, like that is the more extreme, like militant groups.
With the Iranian Balochistan, what you have to understand is that the city, mainly Zahedan, that's the biggest city, that is just largely controlled by the central government, along with the port as well, the Charbahar port. But the rural areas are completely controlled by either cartels or jihadis, and sometimes it's just a mix of both. And you have
Oh, so you're saying
groups like this pop up.
so you're saying that like if you're talking about Zahedan, right, or Zahedan, right?
Yeah,
So the largest city of Iranian Balochistan is the part that like the Iranian government has control over, right?
yeah, has direct control over,
But
along with that
then
port
aside
city.
from that, like if you go into the villages of Sistan and Balochistan, uh, then you really begin to like hit like drug cartels and like jihadis basically.
Yeah, that'll be the scary part of Balochistan, and it's basically just due to neglect and just the government not giving a shit to, repurpose or have that place to economically develop. So obviously, this will the bad actors will take advantage of that.
Right. What's the one to the north of? What's this province to the north of the Balochistan region?
That would be one of the Khorasans.
Khorasan province. Okay, gotcha. And
We got three of them.
okay, got you. So then this would be Razavi, Khorasan. No,
This would be Khorasan Junubi, or southern.
southern Khorasan. Okay, South Khorasan province. Okay, got it. And then this is what I'm guessing. This is predominantly Persian, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some pockets of Pashtuns that live there, but largely just a Persian area.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So this is beginning to basically paint a bigger picture for what Iran is actually sort of the and how do the courts operate in Iran? Is there so how is justice sort of dealt in Iran, or how is I'm assuming that there has to be at the very least, right? If you're going to have in every country, there's generally some sort of facade of justice or whatever, right? In Iran, how does that work, right?
So, if there is any particular person that you have grievances with, there's obviously the criminal, the civil, all those branches.
Yeah.
You have the right to a lawyer, and no one, aside from the supreme leader, is above the law, even the president.
Okay.
So, that would basically. Now, you could disagree with some of the laws that they have implemented, but largely it shouldn't be super different from courts anywhere else. You go make a claim or have a certain accusation to make at a certain group. They'll be notified either by phone, email, or just in person. Then I'll get a lawyer, and then you just present your case in front of a judge.
Right. Okay, now that makes perfect sense. So and I'm guessing they have like a court system. They have like intermediary courts, and then they have the Supreme Court of Iran, and
Yeah, and more local as well.
they have local courts as well. Okay. So and there is some sort of separation of powers in regards to that, except for obviously the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah is the one that is above the law.
Yeah, you cannot, and the only reason there would be people politically that may appear above the law is because they're friends with the Ayatollah. But otherwise, if there's say a mayor, if there is a person that has some level of political power, lower political power, the law will be applied to them if not intervened by the supreme leader.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I do have one other question about Iran in general.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the experiences, and I don't know if you know anyone, but what are the experiences of trans people in Iran? Because I know relatively for the region, right? So given in comparison to Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and it's sort of neighbors, right? My understanding of the sort of situation in Iran for trans people is that there's significantly more leniency in Iran in comparison to its neighbors. And I think that had something to do with a trans woman literally going to Khomeini, and basically Khomeini writing a fatwa about trans women are women, I guess. I think that was the fatwa or something. So what is the situation for I know from what I could gather, gay people and bisexual people basically have to pretend to be straight, fully straight. And gay people are absolutely not doing well in Iran, but trans people, while they're not, while they're not sort of like enjoying as much privilege as you would expect, they're also, it could be far worse, right? Is You could kind of say that, right? Like it's like there's a lot to improve in terms of trans rights in Iran for sure, but given in comparison to the neighbors of Iran, it's not bad. Is that a fair assessment?
Somewhat. I mean, they still obviously there's still prejudice against them,
Right.
right? By regular people. But I kind of view it as it's just that you're just so homophobic that you're just willing to turn a blind eye uh, on the T group of the LGBT.
I'm
That's
sorry.
basically how I see it.
Oh, so basically like, oh, okay. I get where you're coming from. So basically it's more like they're so heavily focused on like being homophobic in particular that trans people are like, they're like they even though they get prejudice, they won't get as much prejudice as like gay people in Iran.
Exactly. So, and I have a lot of most of my friends in Iran are actually gay, and what they say is that they're in again more liberal areas. There's a three strikes rule. So if you get caught once, they'll give you a little talking, fine you, maybe even a whip. Second time it's going to be harsher. Third time you have two options: either forced transition or death. And those are the options you have.
Interesting. That is interesting. So, okay. So that's a dynamic that I kind of figured that was the case, that Iran was being so, like, the Iranian government was so focused on being homophobic that, but like, was it like, do you think it was out of the goodness of Khomeini's heart that he basically said, "No, trans women are like, you, like, we should fund transitioning, that sort of thing," right? Where that sort of allowance of trans people's existence in Iran. Do you think it was out of the goodness of his heart, or was it like, did you like, do you think there was some obvious political gain to be had there? Like, what do you think is?
Well, as I said, like because the the gay part of it is way more taboo. Um, I don't know if it was like the goodness of his heart. It is possible that it could have been. I can't really read his thoughts on that matter, but I think I think it's just that the turning of the blind eye and just like giving families some relief because in Iran, if your son or daughter comes out as gay, like a lot of families just straight up have a panic attack. Like they legit lose it. And maybe that would be some sort of comfort for them should they transition so then it, I guess, wouldn't be gay. And maybe that could have been the calculation he made. But truth be told, I don't really know what was the decision behind that.
Got it. Oh, that makes perfect sense. Um, but yeah. So what? By the way, so going back to Masa Amini, right, or getting back to Gina Amini, what can people here in the United States do? What can we do here?
As for people, you will simply, if you have platforms, you give it to Iranian women, more specifically. Um, and I could even advise you to do this. I'm always happy to answer questions, however many questions you might have, like within the history of Iran. And to my knowledge, I'll be more than willing to help you. But for in this particular case, the best solidarity you could show is allow women that have lived in Iran share their experiences and spread the word as much as you can. That's the best people outside of Iran can do.
That makes, yeah, So is there anything that we can donate to help, or is there any sort of call to action that you have, or is this sort of situation like, because I like I said, whenever I talk about Sri Lanka, this is kind of a situation where what really can you do as an outsider in looking in? Do you know what I mean? Like if you're talking
Yeah,
about Sri Lanka and this, like going back to Sri Lanka for example, right? Um it's really hard to help, right? It's really hard to actually
mhm,
donate, and you got to do your due diligence, and it's not easy to like it's hard to basically find the right organization to donate to, right?
yeah. And here it will be even harder. Because there are always shams, some of them even pro-government, that you might run into and not know it. Realistically, the only thing that like an outsider can do is smuggle in the Elon Musk Starlink dishes and hand them out to the local population there, have them set it up. That's really the only thing they could do. Aside from that, it's simply spread the word and talk about their experiences.
So basically, and by the way, if you have any recommendations on who you like, if you ever have any recommendations on who you want me to talk to regarding, Gina Imini, um or just generally the situation that is developing in Iran, always feel free to hit me up on, what's going on in or always feel free to hit me up. I'd love to, use whatever I have to bring light to marginalized groups' experiences. And if you have any recommendations, by all means, let me know.
There is one or other alternative for you to bring attention to. I'll give him a little promo here. He has done an interview of his own cousin that had a similar issue. That could be like a way you could bring some light to it. But as for content creators on Twitch, I don't know if there are many, and I don't know anyone that would be comfortable coming on the platform to talk about it. But I could recommend Progressive Brats. Uh, and I think you know her, you rated her before, and she returned the favor with you as well. That could be a way for you to basically have her on, have her talk about her experiences, or even she might know something that had that experience.
Right. No, for sure. I'd love to have her on this program to talk about this because um I think, I think like, and this is sort of a general frustration that I have with this platform, right? And we've had multiple conversations. I think I brought you on when we were talking about Sri Lanka, sort of when Gotabaya Rajapaksa was thrown out of the president's office, right? Um,
Okay.
and one of my biggest frustrations was, the sort of what is often talked about, especially on mainstream news, is sort of a kind of whitewash perspective of what is actually going on in the ground reality. We're not like we are hearing certain voices here and there, but they're like 2-minute bite-sized clips, right? That those are the most easily accessible clips. But we don't really have, I don't know to what extent we have a lot of Iranian or Persian content creators on Twitch, and I can only imagine like what kind of what kind of thing that progressive brat has to do to has to go through to constantly talk about Iran. So and I'm guessing it must be incredibly painful for her to talk about all this. So um I like and like sorry, I like when I veered off the track a little bit. Like it's like my biggest frustration with this platform is that we're not really, I don't think we're getting enough adequate views. I don't think we're getting enough adequate people from uh I don't think we're getting adequate perspectives from people from that particular region. You know what I mean?
Right. Very limited sample, you could, I guess, even say.
Yeah, we're getting a very limited sample of what's going on. Um and I think parts of the world like Iran, especially India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, they need to be talked about a lot more on this platform. I think there are certain issues that need to be brought up a lot more on this platform. And yeah,
Yeah,
but
not many people talking about it, even though it's like actually life changing for a lot of people, especially the Sri Lanka one, which I didn't know. I really didn't know much about. I only vaguely heard about the civil war that happened there, but you actually opened my eyes to basically just give me like a complete breakdown of what happened there, what caused it, post-colonial, state, the players involved.
right. I mean, I didn't even go fully in depth into that. There's actually far more players that were involved than I let on, right? Um,
Right.
there's Plody, like we talked about the LTTE, but there's also Plody, um, and among multiple different militant groups in Sri Lanka, that I didn't really talk about. And on top of that, we really didn't talk about the dynamic of the Muslims of Sri Lanka, sort of what they've
Yeah.
had to deal with on kind of both sides in a sense, right? But
Yeah.
more so from the LTTE, right? So
Mhm.
there's a lot of stuff that I left out in our discussion, and but like, yeah, more like I think these sorts of perspectives from the third world need to be talked about more and more and more. And and again, uh, whenever if Progressive Brad ever wants to come on, open invitation to have her on to talk about Iran, obviously. But yeah, for sure.
And yeah, beyond that, as I say, outsiders, aside from bringing attention and using their platform, not much else. And that honestly could go a long way. You bring eyes that might have not, known about this issue or cared about it. You bring attention to it, and give some context to it.
Right. And at this point, that's basically all we can do.
Yeah.
Um
Beyond that, there isn't much. Not even like a donation.
I've been there before, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um but yeah. Do you have anything, I mean, do you have anything else you want to add to sort of painting the picture of like how Iran works and what is going on in Iran? If you have anything else to add, that'd be that'd be greatly helpful, or that would help a
Uh,
lot.
I think that's really all I could give, just to paint a general picture of contemporary Iran and the current issue. And yeah, I think you now have like a very good understanding of how the society, legally, militarily, culturally, and all aspects that functions for now, in this moment.
Right. Okay. Right.
Not much more we can add, really.
Right. I think, I mean, chat, I don't know if this has been super enlightening to you guys. I'm hoping it was. It was super enlightening for me because despite like I like by the way, unlike a lot of Americans, I know a little bit. I kind of went into this sort of I started asking, like, I went into this sort of thing understanding a little bit about Iran actually, because I did know a decent chunk about Iran before coming in, but I think what Parse did for me was he expanded on some of the stuff that I already knew about Iran, and then kind of introduced new concepts. And what I'm hoping is that, like, chat, that you learned a lot from this. Did you, like, what did you guys think? Hello, chat.
Looks like Lawlamator was the most active one.
Malamater, are you there? It was good. Hey, little Krish, thank you. Um, but yeah, um, but yeah, I think this was certainly. I think this was popped in way too late. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, the VOD is gonna be up, right? Um,
And also, Arun, I know this has been a long discussion, but you do have my full permission to upload this on YouTube if you want.
Oh, well, thanks for doing that beforehand. I was gonna ask you that like later afterwards. But yeah, I will certainly upload this to YouTube. Thanks for giving me the permission. I was like gonna
Yeah,
add because as soon as I was done with stream, I was gonna ask you, hey, can I put this upload? Like, can I upload this on YouTube? Like,
yeah, you have my full permission. You can do that.
yeah, and I think I do want to reach out to Progressive Brat and see if she's up to because I know this has taken a toll on her as well, and I don't want to you know I don't want to like exacerbate already anything that's already been like I don't want to exacerbate anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah, because like me personally, and this is something that I'm doing full disclosure. I've effectively reached a point where I'm taking a break about talking about Sri Lanka. I can't tolerate it anymore. Because
I can empathize with that.
yeah, so like at that I've gotten to a point where Sri Lanka I've gotten to a point where talking about Sri Lanka like Sri Lanka fucks me up every time I talk about it. It really infuriates me, and it's like so I don't want to that. I don't want to exacerbate anything about that. That's all. But yeah.
It is healthy to take a break.
Yeah.
It's necessary.
Yeah. Oh, 1000%. But yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for coming on. Also, especially thanks for coming on at the last moment. This is like totally unplanned. I basically asked like, hey, do you want to like come on and just talk about this? It was literally like 4 hours ago. I was like, hey, do you want to like, uh, come on, do you want to come on stream to talk about this sort of thing?
Yeah, and thanks for having me, and more importantly, thanks for bringing attention to this.
No, anytime, dude. I knew this was important. I knew, like I knew I had to talk about this at some point, but I needed the right people to help me talk about this sort of thing because I certainly was not going to be able to handle this topic on my own without a perspective from Iran at the very least. I was not going to be able to handle this perspective. And that's partially the reason I don't like I want to talk about sort of the situation that's brewing in Ethiopia as well. And in the Tigray region, but I don't know anyone from there. So I can't I unfortunately am not able to adequately cover that.
I do know someone
Oh, is
that I
that
met a while ago in a different server. He's from, I believe, Sudan, but he has family that are from Ethiopia.
Oh, interesting.
And he's a journalist that resides as a Qatari citizen, but currently lives in India.
Wow.
And yeah, yeah, it's insane. And yeah, he has a lot of insight in what's happening in Ethiopia.
Really? If you can put me in touch with him, that'd be great. I'd love to talk about what's going on in Ethiopia.
I will try, but he, as I said, he is a journalist. He does go into like the active, like hot zones for news. Like he was in Sri Lanka when shit was going down there. He did go to Afghanistan post Taliban takeover, and he has been in Lebanon when shit was getting tense there. So
Interesting.
yeah, he's a busy man, but I will try to get you in touch with him.
That would be great because I'd love to hear that insight regarding what is happening in Ethiopia as well. Because by the way, like I have not heard a damn thing about I have not heard a damn thing on Twitch about Ethiopia. Not a single thing. And I think it's a damn shame. I think it's a damn shame that no one's talking about this. And people need, and I think someone needs to shed light on this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I want light to be shed on that as well.
Yeah, I will try my best, but again, just
Hey,
remember he's a busy person.
I mean, the fact that you putting in this effort to do all this for me, I really appreciate it, brother. And also, like, I hope, I hope at some point you'll be able to establish contact with your family. It must be, it really, like, I know how, like, it, I can't imagine how that feels right now, but hopefully everything will work out for you.
Yeah, thanks.
And
Thank you.
and by the way, if you need anything from me, let me know.
I will 100% let you know, and also this goes both ways as well. Should you need or want anything, uh, feel free to ask me.
For sure. Alrighty. With all that being said, I really want to thank you for coming on to talk about Iran. I really want to thank you for coming on to talk about Iran. This is an issue that you provided a perspective on what is happening there that I think was sorely needed. And I want to thank you for coming on this platform to, to talk about this. And I think you've really informed a good chunk of people that might not have been super informed about this earlier. And not just about like the protests in the wake of Gina Amini, or also known as Massa Amini. You've also informed a lot of people on like how Iran has generally worked, and like sort of an understanding of Iranian politics and sort of the ethnic dynamics of Iran. I think that's also a very insightful perspective that you brought to the table, and I think I want to thank you for that as well.
Yeah, and again, thank you for the platform that you've given me to be able to even share this in the first place, and your coverage of it as well. And I'm always happy to answer any questions that's within my ability to answer.
Of course, man. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, with all that being said, it's time to go. I'll probably still be on your stream if you're going to continue, but either way, I'll catch you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for coming on.
Have a good day.
You too.